Before we get into the substance, although this is substance, I would like to provide a verbal description for those who are attending who may have visual impairments. I'm a Caucasian male in my late 60s. I have glasses. My hair is brown, though liberally sprinkled with gray. I am wearing a pink collared shirt, and I have a signed Carl Yastrzemski Red Sox jersey as my background at our offices here at 3i Home. If we could bring up the next slide. 3i Housing of Maine is grateful to our sponsors for today's event. They are Martins Point Healthcare and Mobility Works. Martins Point Healthcare is a not-for-profit organization with locations in Maine and New Hampshire. As an organization providing both direct healthcare services and health insurance plans, Martins Point is on a mission to deliver the care every person deserves. Mobility Works, with 90 locations throughout the United States, maintains the largest inventory of wheelchair-accessible vehicles in the country. I can speak from personal experience that the Mobility Works location in Gray here in Maine is top-notch. The staff excels at customer service. Courtesy is their watchword. Both Martins Point and Mobility Works are leaders in their field, and we are very appreciative for their support. We are also extremely grateful for today's panelists, Allison Knight, Annemarie Albiston, and Marissa Ditkowsky. Our series of lunch and learns are designed to be interactive discussions to highlight the 3 I's that comprise our name and our mission. There's a slide that hopefully everyone can see. The first event we held in May was around the innovative and assistive technology we will incorporate into the 3i Home model now being developed in Scarborough, Maine. More on that a little bit later. Today's second event is on integrated home and community-based services. We will conclude our third program later this fall with a focus on creating a community that promotes independence. Now, none of these topics can be dealt with alone. Innovative technology that assists people with disabilities navigate through activities of daily living is consistent with the right we all have to exercise our independence. The same holds true for the right to choose the most integrated setting in which to live, one that meets our life's circumstances. As you no doubt understand, the issues raised by these 3 I's are complex and they can be daunting. If that was not the case, there would be no need for 3i Housing of Maine. But yet, 32 years after enactment of the Americans with Disabilities Act, there is still a tremendous need for more inclusive, equitable, and accessible housing to address the crisis we face in Maine and throughout the nation. Because of the partnerships that 3i Home has made, we stand at the cusp of implementing long overdue change in how our friends, neighbors, and loved ones with disabilities access stable, supportive housing and exercise their right to choose the most integrated setting possible. At the end of the program, we will provide you with an update on the status of our Scarborough project. But first, let me introduce our panelists. They are in order. Allison Knight. Allison is a licensed social worker. She is transition manager for the Maine Long-Term Care Ombudsman's program. In this role, Allison oversees all the transitions from an institutional setting to a home and community-based one. In this capacity, Allison interacts with hospitals and long-term care facilities. She began her career working for Adult Protective Services, then served as a care coordinator at Elder Independence of Maine, prior to moving to the Ombudsman's office 10 years ago. Annemarie Albiston and her husband, Bruce, were catapulted into the world of disabilities in 2005. Annemarie's father, Andre, had a stroke and acquired aphasia, affecting his speech and language. Andre was an educator, and communicating with young adults was his passion. The Albistons set out to make a difference in the lives of people with aphasia establishing the Aphasia Center of Maine, and an annual retreat, the Andre R. Hemond Aphasia Retreat Weekend. Inspired by the change one weekend made in the lives of participants, Annemarie and Bruce searched for ways to reach more people with a wide variety of disabilities. Their vision, now a reality, is the Adaptive Outdoor Education Center that has been in operation since 2015. Marissa Ditkowsky is an attorney and a disabled activist. She is a staff attorney with SEDEC DC, where she leads the Disabilities Community Project. Her practice focuses on serving low-income DC residents with disabilities who are faced with debt and consumer problems. Prior to joining SEDEC, Marissa served as a litigation fellow at the AARP Foundation, where she dealt with cases involving age discrimination, elder abuse, and other issues facing older Americans. Her legal writings on disability rights, reproductive justice, and workers' rights have been published in such journals as the National Lawyers Guild Review and the Journal of Gender, Social Policy. Marissa is a member of the Disability Rights Bar Association and a former leader of the National Disabled Law Students Association. And she's an undergraduate from a prestigious college, university rather, in Waltham, Massachusetts, of which I'm particularly fond. I'll now turn the program over to Allison to talk about her work. And we appreciate everyone's attendance and look forward to a full discussion after our presenters. Allison.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Allison Knight, and as Paul said, I work for the Long-Term Care Ombudsman program here in Maine. And to follow in what Paul shared, for anyone who is not visually able to see this, I am a white female and I have dark brown hair and I am 50. So I'm going to start first by just sharing a little bit about the Ombudsman program. We are a nonprofit agency whose mission is to advocate for quality of life and care for the long-term care consumers. Our services are free and confidential. Federal law and Maine law authorize our staff to investigate complaints made by or on behalf of a long-term care consumer, and we assist consumers in exercising their rights that are guaranteed by law. We serve residents in nursing homes, assisted housing programs, residential care, assisted living. We also serve consumers that are receiving home care services, as well as patients in hospitals. And really, we touch upon anything that deals with the long-term care system. So my role is transition manager, and I oversee the Homeward Bound program, and I work in accordance with the Office of Aging and Disability Services. So in Maine, it's called Homeward Bound, but the federal program is Money Follows the Person, which I'm sure many people have probably heard about. We are just getting started back up here in Maine with helping to transition people out of long-term care facilities as well as hospitals. In order to be eligible for Homeward Bound, you do need to be nursing home level of care, be eligible for Maine Care, have resided in a hospital or a facility for 60 days, and be moving to a qualified residence, which could be your own home, a home of a family member or a friend. It also includes group homes as long as they have 4 beds or less. So part of Homeward Bound focuses on setting up a safe transition plan so that whoever the participant is, that when they move to the community from the facility, that we can ensure health and safety. So there's a team of people who work together. There's the Ombudsman program who act as the referral and advocacy agency. So we would get the initial referrals. It goes to our intake staff, and then from there it gets assigned by me to one of our regional ombudsmen. They will connect with the potential participant. We have an application that needs to be completed. There's a release of information they sign. There's also a consent so that they say they actually want to move forward with putting together a plan to see if it would work for them. And then we get a transition coordinator involved, and they do the bulk of the planning. They put together the risk mitigation plan with the participants' input. There's an interdisciplinary team that the participant themselves can say who they want present. So there's a plan put together that identifies all the goals. And then there's also a backup plan, because again, we need to ensure health and safety when someone's living in the community. There's also funding available, which helps to overcome barriers, because when you're living in a nursing home, you often are paying a cost of care, which leaves you with $40 a month for living. So a barrier could be not having money for security deposit or first month's rent. You may need home furnishings. And then there's some money for food, as well as money for environmental modifications and any medical equipment that your insurance may or that probably would not pay for. An example would be, say a ceiling track lift. So the role, like I said, of the Ombudsman program, we are the referral and advocacy managers, meaning we have that first initial contact with any interested participant. And then we have myself, which is the transition manager. We currently are working with a couple of transition coordinators who have been hired through the Office of Aging and Disability Services. So we have recently transitioned one person, and I don't know if anyone's familiar with the Maine Monitor paper, but Brenda Gallant, the state ombudsman, and I were just interviewed by them, and one of our most recent Homeward Bound consumers was also interviewed. So that's a good article to read if you're interested. So part of the team would be having a transition coordinator and a housing specialist. So we work with Dave Prjansky from Department of Health and Human Services. He is our current housing specialist, and he can help work with the different housing property managers, especially if we're needing to access some of the money for the reasonable accommodation, because some property managers have funding available, and if not, we can access the Homeward Bound money. And when someone moves into the community, Homeward Bound would follow them for 6 months. So the Ombudsman program does remain involved. And then they have the care coordinator and whoever else they've identified to be part of their team. And so the community programs that someone would access services through would be 3 of our waiver programs, and those are both federally and state funded. They would be the Section 18, which is your brain injury waiver, Section 19, which is the elderly and adults with disability waiver, and then Section 20, which is the other related conditions waiver. And in order to be eligible for those programs, you have to be at least 18 years of age, nursing home level of care, and be eligible for Maine care. Section 19, which is the elder and adults with disability waiver, is the most common that we work with. And then next would be probably Section 18, which is the brain injury waiver, which those folks tend to go to group homes, and they typically are more than 4 beds. So sometimes we have to get creative when we're trying to transition someone into that particular program. For example, we had one gentleman transition. He was able to go to the group home through Homeward Bound because at the time he moved, there were only 3 people in the home. But as soon as, it went over that 4th person, he would then be ineligible. And there's one agency, which is Goodwill, which is the agency that helps us to do these transitions. And then the other related conditions waiver, That is for folks who have an other related condition. It's something that they would have had prior to the age of 22. It could be cerebral palsy, that's a common one. Muscular dystrophy would be another example. And the setting for them is typically a group home as well. And their group homes tend to be 4 beds or less, but you can also receive these services in your own home or the home of a family member. Did you want any more detail, Paul, on the waivers?
No, I think that you've covered it. I would just say that the section 19, which are other adults and people with physical disabilities, my understanding is statewide there are over 2,000 people who are on those waivers. And so if you could describe, my understanding also is that the public funding exists to guarantee a person a spot in a nursing home in our state if they meet the eligibility. In other words, they're nursing home eligible. And yet there is this opportunity through the waiver mechanism for such an individual to actually live in the community rather than being placed perhaps for an extended period of time in a nursing facility. Is that a fair statement?
Yes. So it can be a little bit tricky because there are some people who are eligible for Maine Care to live in a nursing home, but not necessarily eligible for Maine Care to be in the community. And it's based on their monthly income. So as long as the person meets that Maine Care eligibility, yes, they could access the Section 19 services in the community, which would be a best option for, most people who want to maintain some level of independence and be in their own home. And in order to qualify for this level of care, there's a few different ways. You can have a nursing need, which would require a registered nurse every 8 hours in a 24-hour period, such as, you're on new oxygen, maybe you have an intramuscular injection, you could have a tracheostomy or be on a ventilator, or wound dressing changes for wounds. And then another way to qualify would be based on a cognition or a behavioral score. And then you can also be requiring extensive assist for 3 out of 5 of what we call the shaded ADLs, which would be transfers, toileting, eating, locomotion, and bed mobility. And what I mean by extensive assist is someone physically needing to help you. So, some people only require queuing, but this would be, you physically need someone holding on to you to ambulate through the hallway, or you need someone to physically hold on to you to transfer in and out of your wheelchair or in and out of bed. And in Maine, we have an extremely high eligibility requirement. So it makes our transitions a little bit more complicated. I remember back when we were first learning about Money Follows the Person and we were doing some training, and they showed us a video of someone who had transitioned, and it wasn't from Maine, it was from another state. And the person was up walking around, they were dancing, showing how excited they were. And a lot of the participants that we have, they're not like that. They might be bedbound, they require a wheelchair. So it's definitely there's more to it. We have to put in a lot of work to make sure that someone can be safe in the community here in Maine.
Thank you. I'm sure we'll have more discussion during the Q&A section, but I appreciate your presentation, Allison.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much. And Annemarie, we thank you particularly on short notice for being available today, and look forward to your presentation about what's going on with your nonprofit organization and how we might be able to team up.
You bet. Thank you. Thank you for having us. And I'm going to share screen so I can share how we are all about fun and experience and quality of life. Can you see that? Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, great. So I'm going to go rather quickly, but I think a lot of the smiles that you're going to see are going to speak for themselves. So Again, I am Annemarie Albiston, along with my husband, who is also on this call. We founded the Aphasia Center of Maine and the Adaptive Outdoor Education Center. Everything started because my dad had a stroke, as Paul mentioned, had aphasia, didn't know what it was, and not a lot out there for people with aphasia. So it's frustrating, it's isolating, and it's pretty difficult. So we got together a whole bunch of great folks. This is our staff. We have a couple folks, Allie and Zach are at our Brunswick location. Kayla is in Carabasset. Terry is also in Carabasset, and Bruce and I are, well, we're all over the place, but this is our staff. We're small, we're mighty, and we sure know how to have a good time with our folks. So in case you don't know, aphasia is loss of language, not intellect. So the person knows what they want to say, but cannot necessarily get that word out. It can also affect your reading and your writing. So you're basically robbed of your communication. It's extremely frustrating and lonely. 2012, we wanted to do something for these folks, mainly obviously because of my dad. My dad had actually passed before we started, but we saw what he went through. We understood. My parents lived with us after my dad was sick, and we formed this retreat. Our youngest participant at the time was 9 years old, had a stroke and aphasia. The retreat weekend is all about quality of life. It's all about fun. It's all about experience. It's all about bringing people together who are living with aphasia and their caring partners, their family, their friends, and people who get it, who understand if they can't get that word out. We are currently doing virtual. We have folks that join us from all up and down the East Coast, and we do meet every single Monday morning, and it's awesome. It's my favorite day of the week and the best possible way to start a Monday morning. See if this, there we go. So you may wonder, why do I share that? That was my father. That was a new experience for him, which is what a lot of our folks come to us and experience new things. He was having fun. And the laughter, I have no idea why so many years ago I videotaped that. I have no idea. However, I have used it extensively because when we do our programming, we want to enhance the quality of life. We want to have fun. We want to give new experiences because a lot of our folks, they have their own challenges. They've been told no forever. No, you can't do that. Well, we say, if you want to try it, we're going to try and make that happen for you and have some level of success in the activity that you're doing. So that's why I show that quick video. Well, it's longer, but plus I like to see my dad laughing and stuff. So as you know, many folks are told no their entire life. No, you can't do that. No, you can't go there. And as I mentioned, we're going to try to make that happen. A lot of our folks lose family, lose friends. We want to have a good, positive experience and good relationship. As Paul mentioned, we were the Aphasia Center of Maine starting in 2012. We wanted to do more. So in 2015, we opened the doors to the Adaptive Outdoor Education Center, our home base being in Carabasset Valley at Sugarloaf. So this is our lodge. We are a fully accessible lodge. We can sleep 25 folks. We're on a 2-acre plot of land in Carabasset. We are 1 mile from the access road to Sugarloaf Mountain, if any of you are skiers. And we do programming all over the state of Maine. This is just our home base where I'm actually heading when we finish the call today, because we have a big group coming in this weekend. Just a few pictures of the inside. Again, fully accessible. People bring their own food. They meet other people. It's inclusive. As long as one person in that group that might come to stay has a disability, they can bring 10 of their friends. We're all about inclusion. We're all about bringing people together. And again, obviously the experience, so many friendships have formed. This lodge it's magical what has happened in this place. You can see kind of that maze right in the front there. In August, we actually had a wedding take place there. So it was a perfect venue for a wedding, and there were lots of wheelchairs bombing around, and it was fantastic. But this is our challenge playground. We do flowers, gardening. There's a nature trail behind. We have transportation. Our 15-passenger bus is currently at our Brunswick location, and we have a van that's up north at the moment. We will jump through hoops because, as we know, transportation is a definite challenge for our folks. This is just one of my favorite videos. That is an example of, well, that's Ricky. And the group that came up and spent the night, they are all in group homes. So we do a lot of work with folks in group homes all over the state. We do have some challenges, again, where staff is kind of in a rut, so to speak. They don't want to do the changes. So sometimes there's a little bit of a hesitation to join us in something. And then once they join continuously and come to many of our programs. It's just getting them through that door, so to speak. Some of our programs I'm going to go quickly through. We have a sailing program Monday and Thursdays. We collaborate, we partner with a lot of different organizations, Sail Maine being one of them. We find that collaborating is definitely the way to go, particularly for our folks. We are not medical people. So if somebody needs a medication or anything other than what we can provide, then they bring somebody with them, whether it's a friend, a staff, family, whomever. We don't toilet people and that type of thing. Again, we're about the experience. That gentleman, that's Bill. He is a quad. He is actually sailing that sailboat with a toggle stick. If you look at where his hand is, that is how he is actually controlling the boat. It's pretty awesome. We do all of the different water sports. As you can see here, the water sports are hugely popular. One of our most popular is water skiing. Water skiing is hugely popular. And here you can see how we can adapt our paddle boards. Both Kellen up top and Mike down bottom are in wheelchairs, and we're able to get them out on the water safely. Paddle boarding. This is Dean. He's in our aphasia group, and he is having a ball out there. First time water skiing right there, 7 years old this summer. We have a ski program that happens to be my husband, who is probably the happiest out there on the mountain. We will be at 5 different mountains this year with our ski program: Sugarloaf, Saddleback, New Herman, Camden Snowball, and headed up to the county, up to Big Rock. So some of our folks, they're one-on-one with a buddy. Some of them will be inclusive in the ski school. It all depends on what their needs are. A lot of our folks that come to Sugarloaf do kind of a ski, climb, and stay program where they'll ski with us. Then we'll take them rock climbing at an indoor location in Kiribati, and then they'll stay in our lodge and stay for the weekend. It's pretty awesome. Our youngest participant, 3. Our oldest, 96, to the top of the climbing wall. We also have a race team. This is Wes, and our race team is currently at Sugarloaf, but we do go to other mountains for our race team. We had an LLBean event on our Brunswick campus. This is Kellen, and he and his brother and brother's girlfriend came. And again, everything on our campuses and with what we do is all inclusive. We climb in, well, you can see all sorts of different locations. We have the whole adaptive setup. As you can see, there's Tina. She has use of one arm, so she's able to actually pull herself up with our adaptive equipment. We can adjust the tensions to make it easier or harder for her.
All right, 1 or 2 more. Oh my God, he almost there.
Encouraging them all the way. We also do climbing as what you would think of climbing. Coming up actually next weekend, we will be at Otter Cliffs. So it is a weekend of camping and our climbers are there for the whole weekend and climbing at Otter Cliffs. We did a pilot program this summer for children with autism. We had a summer camp and it went extraordinarily well. And quick story, well, these two were smiling the whole time. That's Kayla, she's our director, and Ben. We had one participant who her parents had signed her up for a summer camp and she was asked to leave. So imagine how happy and how excited the parents were to be able to come, drop their kids for 4 hours a day, have them accepted, making friends, be included, and again, just having a great time and want to come back the next day. We also do special programs. This is a group of folks from all over the country, all of them in wheelchairs, and we had this Wheel Together retreat just in July up at our lodge in Kiribati. We do caregiver retreats. We have another one coming up in October. Again, they come from all over and spend a long weekend with us up in Kiribati. Caregivers are often the forgotten folks. It's a lot of hard work. I was a caregiver for my dad when my parents lived with us, and I personally would not have traded it for the world. We also do special programs. Again, this is the Impossible Dream, a 60-foot catamaran that comes up from Miami, Florida. And this is a group of folks that we had got out there out into Casco Bay. So we are one of their port ambassadors when they come up, and we're able to get our folks out on the water with them for free. Fashion show, nothing but getting them out there and building confidence. This is Emma. Bringing it a little closer to home for those of you in Maine, our second location opened just about a year ago. This is the Horizon Center. It is in Brunswick, and it is a fully accessible event center. And we are a 20-acre campus. On our back 40, there's a picture of our inside of our fully accessible event center. We have a commercial kitchen, gardens. All of our plants are all Maine native. And then we have our accessible trails. We currently also have a disc golf course that is set up in here. So from what we've been told, we're the only accessible disc golf, wheelchair accessible in the country. We don't know if that's true or not, but that's what we've been told. So we have these trails that are accessible all the way out. It'll probably be about 1.5 miles or so when we're finished. So this is on our Brunswick campus. One of the things that we absolutely adore is when the friendships happen. These 3 men met through our fly fishing program. They now are pretty much inseparable. They do a bunch of different programs together. This was actually at Ethan's graduation party that was held at our Brunswick location. Ethan's in the middle. They spend weekends together. They sign up for surfing together and various programs together. And it's absolutely beautiful to see. We are, again, my husband and I, our payment is hugs and smiles. And we just look at some of our folks who may have had a rough start, maybe in a group home, and like to come and be inclusive with other folks, because we welcome anybody and everybody to our programs. But this is Jessica, who came up from Pennsylvania for the Wheel Together retreat. And there's nothing better. The smiles that we work with every day just melt our hearts. And I know I've gone over my time. I apologize. And there's our website.
It's magnificent. And thank you very much for a comprehensive presentation. And it's an exciting thing just to watch. I've been by the Brunswick facility. What you've done there is just top notch. It's beautiful. And I took a tour. You were kind enough to give me a tour of the whole complex before you opened the doors. So what you and your organization have done is just outstanding. A quick question. You're so much about fun and inclusion. I wonder how it is that these breadth of services are provided? Is there, is it a sliding scale on how the participants pay, or what, how does that go? And if I'm
Sure.
going down the wrong path, I apologize.
Oh, no, no, no. So our programs, we do charge for our programs, but we will never turn anybody away. So if somebody doesn't have the funding, they're welcome to join us. Some of our programs are $5, some are $8. We also get grants, so we're able to use our grant money. And we also have a lot of folks who donate to us and they say, I would like this to go to the aphasia program or the fly fishing program. We had actually a friend who passed, and in lieu of flowers, it was for a scholarship in his name for people who wanted to do the fly fishing program. And where there's a will, there's a way. And we will always, always accept people no matter what. And one of my dreams would be to have some sort of home living arrangement. My dream would be for folks who have had stroke and aphasia, but I'm over the moon excited for what you're doing, Paul, and your organization, because it's so needed, it's so necessary. And, you know, we see it firsthand all the time, you know, the challenges that folks have and their living arrangements and everything. So we're right there with you, Paul.
Well, it's very, very gracious of you to say, and I know that as we plan our complex and our community, we're going to be doing partnerships, and your organization is at the top of the list. So stay tuned. I'm sure we'll be able to work in those collaborations, because as you say, it is all about collaborating with like-minded organizations.
For
And,
sure.
and here in Maine, it really takes a village.
Great.
So Marissa, I want to save time for you and for questions and answers. I'm going to turn the mic over, and thank you for participating. I hope to follow as a reformed attorney, but it's all yours.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Marissa Ditkowsky. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman with long dark hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a patterned shirt. My background is just kind of my blinds. It's not as fun as Paul's background, unfortunately. So I am, as Paul described, a disabled attorney and activist. And also as Paul described, my organization focuses on safeguarding the rights of DC residents who have low incomes, dealing with often illegal and abusive debt collection practices and consumer problems. And I specifically lead a project that focuses on disabled consumers there, who are disproportionately affected by these issues. We deal with all kinds of problems. As you can imagine, disabled folks are more likely to experience debt and consumer problems for a number of reasons. It's more expensive to be disabled, for one. We refer to that as the crip tax. While disabled folks often make less, whether that's relying on Social Security, losing a job, experiencing job discrimination, all of these types of things kind of contribute and compound. So the types of issues we deal with are like medical debt, student loan issues, Social Security overpayments, general credit card stuff, scams, fraud, identity theft, credit issues. And outside of my full-time job, I helped run the National Disabled Law Students Association, and am helping to start up the National Disabled Legal Professionals Association. And all of this is kind of guided by my experience as a disabled person, and the types of things that I went through myself. So you've heard the word inclusion thrown around a lot in this presentation, but I don't think we've gotten a good definition of what that means. So what does that mean? It's not just being at the table. That's not enough. That's the bare minimum, being at the table. It's having what you say matter, being considered and respected like everyone else. And so this idea sort of got incorporated into American law through this decision that we call Olmsted v. LC. LC stands for Lois Curtis, who was one of the people who brought that suit. We often remember the Olmsted decision by the name Olmsted, and that was the folks being sued in that story. There were actually many Olmsted cases. If we want to remember the heroes of the story, remember Lois Curtis and Elaine Wilson. So these women were in institutions far beyond the end of their medical treatment, despite their medical teams stating that they were ready for community-based programs. So they filed a lawsuit under the Americans with Disabilities Act, which at that point had been in effect for a couple of years. That was signed in 1990. So the state itself was discriminating against these folks under Title II of the ADA. You have a couple of titles, a bunch of different titles under the ADA, which do different things. Title II prohibits discrimination by public entities and state and local governments. I'm sure a lot of you have dealt with things with Title III, which is like public accommodations, like if you go to the grocery store, or Title I deals with employment. This is Title II. So the Supreme Court held that unjustified isolation was discrimination based on disability under the ADA. So there are obviously qualifiers, there always are, as to what is and is not justified, including reasonableness, other factors. Reasonableness always comes up when you're dealing with the ADA. But this case generally just stated that services should be administered in the most integrated and least restrictive setting possible. Following the Olmsted decision, institutions for disabled folks across the country closed and continue to close. They still exist. Disabled folks living in communities generally fare better. Abuse was really rampant in many institutions, and it still is. Folks don't always get the proper care. They're treated as if they're not human. Many of these places may also be for profit, meaning they're prioritizing the bottom line over the lives in those institutions. But we also have state-run institutions that also kind of fall into similar traps, where there might be a lack of resources or just not enough care put into that. For example, Willowbrook, many might have heard of Willowbrook. It has not been open for a very, very, very long time. But that was a state institution that was in New York, on Staten Island. An expose was written about that in the New York Times, and that led to its closure. That was even before Olmsted, before the ADA, that Willowbrook closed. The conditions there were so horrific and so horrendous, that's sort of what we were dealing with. Obviously that is not, it is not, that horrendous in every institution, but that doesn't mean that it is still not the most ideal setting for everyone. And that doesn't mean that there still isn't some issue with the care or the quality of care that's being received by someone in that institution. And allowing disabled folks to engage in self-determination in their community allows disabled folks to use muscles that many don't allow them to use. We're not taught things in our lives because we're underestimated. Like, for example, like many disabled folks aren't taught about finances, not taught about credit cards, not taught about sex, not taught about all of these different types of things that are really important and might well understand, even if in the most basic of terms, it's still really important to try to help exercise those muscles. And when you're living in the community, you get to do that. When you're living in an institution, that's not really going to happen. So you live a better quality of life when you're integrated in your community, have more targeted care that's provided, for example, when you are a recipient of a home and community-based waiver or something to that effect. All states provide for a home and community-based waiver, a home and community-based service through Medicaid. There are some optional programs and waivers that states may provide, and many have, that are not required. This is generally the only way that insurance will cover these types of services in the community at this time. Medicare does not cover these services for extended periods, and private insurance generally does not cover these types of things. So you're either paying fully out of pocket, which is incredibly expensive, or you're on Medicaid and have some sort of home and community-based waiver. So what still remains 20 plus years later? There's still a lot to be done. We've had the ADA for 32 years, and Olmstead has been the law of the land since 1999. So yeah, it's been a while. But many disabled folks are still in institutions unnecessarily. And we saw a lot of this playing out during the COVID-19 pandemic. Disabled people were more likely to be at higher risk for developing severe symptoms of COVID-19. And yet they were in these institutions where things were spreading. They were in close quarters with other people, and they were dying. They were dying, and it was a really bad situation. While Medicaid may cover room and board in institutions, it does not if you live in the community. So there's an institutional bias, and that's ingrained in federal law. It's not like states can be like, we're gonna do that. So that's federal law. There's also sheltered workshops. They're still a thing in many states. Not every state still allows them. For example, Maryland does not allow sub-minimum wage to be paid to people with disabilities anymore. But federal law allows sub-minimum wage or below the minimum wage to be paid to certain people with disabilities doing certain jobs if you get what's called a 14C certificate through the Department of Labor. And that's ingrained in federal law, the Fair Labor Standards Act. And that still exists. What it's saying is the value of a disabled person's work is less than the value of anyone else's work. That is what that is saying. And you're segregated into a sheltered workshop. So that is still the case in many places. There are Medicaid limitations. Often the only way, like I said before, folks can afford or receive home and community-based services. And there's a strict asset and income limit for Medicaid. So often, people will have to keep their assets down to, about $2,000 to be able to maintain their benefits. So there are ABLE accounts for people who are eligible for them. Those are accounts that are set up by essentially the state has a program. Not every state has one, but a lot of states do. They set up a program and you can open up an account if you became disabled before the age of 26 and meet certain requirements. But you essentially have to either be receiving Social Security or meet essentially the same requirements as Social Security in terms of your disability to be able to access those kinds of accounts. But the fact that you had to be disabled before 26 makes it so that a lot of people are not eligible for them. And they often don't work as well for people who aren't getting a steady income or a job or something like that. So if you're disabled and not working, it doesn't really work so well because there are charges associated with ABLE accounts. There are still states that have wait lists and other restrictions for home and community-based services and waivers. And affordable housing is still largely inaccessible. There's a complete lack of programming for affordable and accessible housing. And for affordable housing alone, voucher and public housing programs have years-long wait lists, and those housing options are not always accessible. The services and supports that disabled folks need remain in the community don't necessarily exist or are not fully funded. For example, services to support disabled parents are not as expansive as they should be, and disabled parents are more likely to have their children taken from them. And even with the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act idea in place, K through 12 schools often segregate disabled students in separate classrooms and don't have goals for providing them an adequate education. There are overly restrictive guardianships being granted, preventing disabled folks from asserting their own rights, like voting, and making their own decisions, like who to talk to, who to associate with. We saw this Britney Spears example play out, wanting to have children, being forced to keep an IUD in. And there are less restrictive alternatives that might include like supportive decision-making, powers of attorney. And the last thing I'll mention is the issue of being able to marry. Marriage equality doesn't exist for disabled folks who rely on Medicaid to live. Since their spouse's assets would be counted, that could lead to the loss of life-sustaining health care. So that's a big issue. And I will pass it back to Paul for the rest.
Marissa, you've given us a tour through all of the trials and tribulations and legal hoops that exist. And it's mammoth. As I indicated in the earlier comments, you know, this area that Housing of Maine is focusing on is dealing with one subset of all of the challenges that are presented to people with disabilities. And we think that there is a movement that's being created because 1 in 4 Americans has a disability. That's 61 million people. And, you know, in Maine, we're losing nursing homes. They're just closing. We have a crisis in the workforce, those who do this very important work for personal care, attendants and the like. And there is, without question, an institutional bias towards placing people in locations that are not of their own choosing. And so I can tell you that I sense that a new day is upon us. And it so happens that 3i Housing of Maine has been asked to participate as one of approximately 12 nonprofits nationally to deal with accessible and affordable housing issues. So we're convening our first meeting tomorrow, and it's, you know, we can't solve all the problems with a magic wand, but if we all do our small part, then according to a quote I came across this morning by Van Gogh of all people, things are done by a series of great things are done by a series of small things that are brought together. And the conversation that we're having today with so many interested parties and meaningful people is all about partnerships and about creating a new paradigm to serve our friends, neighbors, and family. So thanks very much for teeing this all up. I know we're 2 minutes away from our tentative closing at 1 o'clock. I'm hoping, Morgan, is there a way to just encourage people to stay 10 more minutes while we wrap this up?
Yeah, we can continue the call. And then if anyone needs to go, we understand. We'll be recording this and can send it to you later. But if you are able to stay with us, we would love that.
Could bring up the second set of slides then, that would, and my my little remarks, if that's possible. So here, I promised an update on where we stand. This is a rendering. It's not actual, but if you see really a small print, and apologize for that, in the lower left-hand corner of the left-hand side of the slide, that left picture says 3i Home. So through our partnership with an outstanding organization that is a nationwide leader in affordable housing development, preservation of affordable housing, based in Boston, they are working in collaboration with us to develop a 50-unit, totally accessible, universal designed complex of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom apartment units that will be for rent, focused on people with physical mobility impairments. And we are under a timeline that hopefully will include groundbreaking in the first quarter of 2023 and opening, welcoming residents in 2024. We can already tell you that through some of the local publicity, you know, we're getting inquiries. We are beginning to take down different kinds of inputs that we're getting from those who have expressed interest. And we're going to be meeting with the state officials at the relevant agencies to fashion a community that is integrated, that is innovative, and does promote independent living. That's really the culmination of an idea and a great partnership again. And I know there's some colleagues from POA on this call, and we just are extraordinarily excited about all this. We know that there are thousands of households in Maine and across the country, quite frankly, that can really benefit from a model like this. So our hope and expectation is that we will make a community and have a vibrant area that is centered around a downtown, which is depicted on the right, with amenities, restaurants, accessible community spaces. And so this will be a place for living, working, educating, socializing. And it's a very, great location for us. And we hope to replicate that. Can I get the next slide, please? Morgan, can we get the next slide, please?
Did it not jump to the next one?
No, it didn't.
No. Okay. Let me try it again. Sorry about that.
Well, you've heard a lot, and I've certainly learned a lot, and there's a bunch more out there. We thought that this might be useful information. I'm sure many of you are familiar, but nonetheless, these 3 items are great reading. For disability rights way back in the 70s. The second one, Emily Ladow, is a contemporary of Morgan's, I believe. She's written a book and is really talking about her personal experience and how we can all sort of be sensitive to our fellows in raising issues and talking forthrightly about disability-related matters. And enjoying the ride is a tour de force by a board member, friend to 3I, and overall, and just a terrific person. So Marissa also, so that's Mitch Sturgeon's. Marissa just gives me a note that disability visibility is also a good one, and we'll add that to the list and recommend the reading. We next have a partial list. We've been working with a number of these organizations. There are more, but we're collecting information so we can provide a resource here, and anyone interested, we can give you specifics on those resources here in the state of Maine. Next slide, please. So we want to again thank you for taking the time for being involved. We're going to be pursuing a lot in the next couple of months. We encourage you to share and sign up for our e-newsletter, which comes out on a quarterly basis. And of course, as Annemarie indicated earlier in her remarks, we welcome donations and your support as we continue to do this really incredibly important work. I know that there's progress that's being made. You know, just today I saw that CBS network indicated that they think that it's about time to become more inclusive for people with disabilities in their programming. I know that the day before that, Kohl's department store came out with a new line of adaptive clothing that is dedicated principally for people with disabilities. And a month before that, Pottery Barn came out with a line of products for people with disabilities. But as a social determinant of health, stable, supportive housing should be at the top of the list. So stay tuned to us. We're going to continue to push forward, and we're going to make it happen through all of the collective efforts of our network, and really appreciate your time and attention.